Our research shows that there's two things that create employee loyalty to a company. The most important two things are my relationship with my boss and is the company investing in me. And if we're going to truly look at any organization that's great, you look at the amount of time and preparation they look into training. I mean, look at a professional college football team. My gosh, before their first game, they do training, they do skill building, they get everybody on the same page. And for us to be a great community, or for a company to be a great community, it's all providing skill building. The Studer Community Institute feels one of our commitments to the community is provide a cost-effective way for managers to get trained, and companies provide training, because the better workplaces we have, the happier employees. The happier employees, the better customers. The more customers we have, then all of a sudden we can grow this community. And that's really what the Studer Community Institute's all about. It's really improving the quality of life in our community, and we think growing jobs is a great way to do that. Well, I think if participants look at one takeaway, we know, for example, that research by Franklin Covey says when you're trying to change one or two things, you have a 90-something chance of success, and after that it goes way down. So they're getting a number of things. So there's hard to say what one or two things they would take, because it's going to be different the type of company you're in. So I don't think we have a cookie cutter approach, but I think the main thing we want to take away is that it's vital to create that consistency. So no matter what tactic you take away, it's how do you create the consistency, which ties into clear expectations, role modeling the behavior you're making employees do, because you have to show what right looks like, rewarding and recognizing that behavior when you see it right, and then of course coaching those that just don't get it yet. So I think it's the value, if there's one thing, it's the value of spending time and investing in showing employees what right looks like to the desired outcome. Well, if you look at value, and I think when you look at the Studer Community Institute, that's really what we're trying to create is value for people in the Pensacola metro area. The reality is, let's say customer service training, we have 250 people here. Now, if those 250 people had to travel out to get the type of training they're getting here, they'd probably pay $250 to $500 for the training. When I travel on the road, they actually charge $1,200 and for a day or two, and so on to each participant. So here, if they traveled, let's just say they pay $250 to $500 for the training. Let's say $250, which is pretty inexpensive. Well, then you have the airfare, and you know the airfare we know out of Pensacola can be rather costly. So let's just say $500 for airfare. Well, then you have a hotel room for 1 or 2 nights. So I believe what they're getting here for $50, they'd be spending anywhere from $750 to $1,000 if they went out of town. There's another really neat thing about it too, is they're networking with all these people they can continue to network with. So if I go out of town for training, which is great, I'm going to be with people I might not know. Well, I'm going to have some relationships. But, you know, I can come here, and if I'm Rebecca from the airport, I might see somebody at the Y, I might see somebody at a store that I can not only say, well, let's network, let's do this together. So I think the networking is really valuable here. So I think that's one of the fringe benefits of doing it local, and probably another fringe benefit is you're not away from your family. You know, this is the first week of school. So for example, this week, it would have probably been really hard for some of these people to travel because they would have missed those first days of school. Or if they would have missed it, they would have felt really bad about it. So if you look at articles that were written about me 8-10 years ago when they started interviewing me in the paper, I said one of my goals is to be a full-time community person, not to be paid, but we really want to make a difference. When they did an article years ago in The Independent, they asked me what are the key things of keeping this city momentum going, and I said one of the things is we've got to make sure we provide training to supervisors, because if we're going to have great companies in Pensacola, we've got to have great managers. And if you're going to have great managers, you have to hire great people, but they're not going to be great without the skill building to do it. So that's why I like doing these locally, and we're fortunate to get a really quality faculty to also provide these type of services locally. Well, one of the advantages we have today is when I first moved to the community, Baptist Hospital became the top hospital in the United States back then on patient satisfaction. People heard about employee engagement. but they sort of thought it was health care and they didn't know if it would transfer. And plus, remember, we have a lot of great health care in the community, so only a few people might touch that. I found when we opened up and started the Blue Wahoos particularly, started with the Pelicans, and I think we did good service at the Pelicans for what we had, but we moved it to the Wahoos with the amount of crowds we got, people could see it firsthand. Also the employees, the employees could see it firsthand. And my loyalty's to the workforce. I get frustrated if I don't see a manager treating employees really, really well, and that doesn't last all that long, because my heart is making sure it's a great workforce for employee to work. Because sometimes they don't have a spokesperson for them. They can't talk on their own, so they need to have a right culture environment. So probably the happiest I am is when I go at Wahoo Stadium, and I always say to the employees, like David, who does the sweeping, or somebody else, I say, Travis, he's in a wheelchair when you come in, I say, thank you so much for working today. And they'll say, thank you, we love it here. And of course, when you go to the Bodacious shops, it's the same thing. We want to make sure that we role model what we're trying to teach, but we also want to learn from each other. I take people to Joe Patty's all the time. I think their service is incredible. The fact that they can move people so quick. I was at Frank Patty one day, and it's like an air traffic controller in his office. He's got TVs looking at every place. And the fourth ring, he answers it. Well, if you're an employee, I better answer it on the third ring. So we don't have a monopoly on this. There's great service throughout Pensacola. We just want to make sure it's spread out even more so. But yeah, you always feel pressure to what we call it, eat your own cooking. So I'm glad we get a chance to eat our own cooking, and seeing that we own a restaurant, it even makes it better. If everybody that would leave here would take some things, first of all, we'd have 250 people that would be happier on the job. Because one of the biggest things we find is if I have the skill to be more successful on the job, I'm happier on the job. If everybody has, let's say, 3 to 4 people in their immediate family, that's 1,000 people now that we've impacted already, right off the bat. Just think of the fact that if I can be 3 compliments to every 1 criticism. Now, if I go out and I start implementing the things and I'm a happier person, I'm more skilled, people around me get happier. So, when you look at Malcolm Caldwell and he talks about the tipping point, it's not just you just get there and you tip. It takes a long process to get there. And then all of a sudden you have a critical mass. And what we're trying to do, I think, in the Pensacola metro area, through the Studer Community Institute, is really create a critical mass of difference makers. A critical mass of people that are not afraid to look at things objectively, not a thing of looking at what are we doing well and what we can do better, and then access training and development to really make the Pensacola metro area the greatest place to live, the greatest place to work, and the greatest place to get service. I've been really fortunate as I travel the country. I'm lucky enough to harvest great information and great ideas from everyone. Sometimes my skill set is transferring what other people say to a way that's more user-friendly, more understandable, or so on, taking the complex down to simple. And research over the years has shown in the workplace to have a good relationship with a boss, it takes 3 positives to 1 negative. Neutral is 2 positives to 1 negative. And if I do 1 positive to 1 negative, I'm going to feel bad about my boss. Now, I will say I think we made a lot of mistakes years ago. And now, most people are too young to remember. When I first got into supervision, they told me to balance the positive and the negative. Well, what they were basically telling me then is to have negative relationship with all the employees. They also told me not to combine personal and professional. When you look at Gallup research, one of the number 1 reason a person likes or dislikes their boss, if the boss they feel cares about them on a personal level, they like their boss. If they don't think the boss does, they don't like their boss. So I think when we look at 3 to 1, what we're trying to say is let's focus on what's right. Recognize and behavior gets repeated. So if I can come out, and I've seen this work over and over again, if an employee does something well, and I say to that person, for example, let's say at a Wahoo game, a fan spills a drink, and our usher runs right over, fixes it, says, I'm so sorry that happened, I will get you another one, no charge. If I go up to that employee and say, that was great, thank you so much, you made a difference. I not only recognize behavior, but I told them that behavior is okay and I want it. And if I say it real loud, So all the other people, all the other ushers hear it, then all the ushers say, well, next time a drink spills in my area, I fix it. It's the right thing to do. So what we're really trying to do by rewarding and recognizing is aligning a person's behavior to the desired outcome, and then get the other people to see what's rewarded and recognized, and pretty soon they will do it. We do all sorts of examples. If they have 8 employees and you start recognize one for certain behavior, within about 2 weeks, all 8 are doing that behavior. And you just got to remember that you recognize all 8. I wrote an article one time is recognize the imitator. And what it said is we all recognize the innovator, the person that goes first, but the person that goes first doesn't make the difference. It's the person that goes second, third, fourth, and fifth, and sixth, and eighth, and ninth, and 10th, because that gives you that critical mass. So 3 to 1 is really vital. And when we tell that to managers, it clicks. We also find we've got to create systems to do it, because it just doesn't happen automatically. So that's when we say things like, what's going well? Who should I recognize? Those types of things. And that allows us to gather up those 3 positives to everyone criticism. Of course, it doesn't have to be the run. It could be 10 to 1, it could be 50 to 1, it could be 100 to 1. It depends on the employee. When I look at what's next, I think we've covered leadership in the workplace, but we did a large process of it. We've done strategic planning. We've done selecting and training employees, and now we've just done customer service. I think some of the other trainings we'd like to do, and certainly these could be in cooperation with the United Way, the Chamber of Commerce, because we all want to work together, could be board of development training. The thing I hear consistently with not-for-profit boards particularly is the need for board development, and they're vital. I think another training would be employee engagement. Because while we've talked a lot about customer satisfaction, you have to have that employee engagement. So employee engagement, which one I think would be real vital. A third one I would think would be process improvement. We use a 5x5, and when Student Group won the Malcolm Baldrige Award, and one of the top places to work is training everyone to do process improvement or 5x5s. So I think helping the community look at how to improve processes at our own company that can improve service, reduce cost, and so on is another thing. And I think performance management. We hear all the time about, how do you do performance management? How do you make sure that you're giving feedback to someone? How do you make sure that, the last thing you want is for an employee to lose their job and be surprised because no one ever told them. Or you pull out the personnel file and there is nothing there. So we really want to focus in, which I think is the most difficult piece of being a manager, is performance management. But people think of it because it's always, well, it's the person that's not performing. We also want to help them do performance management for the people that are performing, because we know that development is vital. So I think we'll focus an awful lot in 2016 on those categories, but particularly I think process improvement, board development, employee engagement, and performance management.